Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. It's an engaging and enlightening talk show on life, relationships, and the business of life. Grab a cup of juice and just
It's time
chill.
to bring you yet
Life
another
Well
amazing
Lived
episode.
by Omobola
And now,
Stephen. Live
welcome
life.
your host.
Live fully.
Good to have you on the podcast Live Well Lived by Omobola Stephen. Now, on the podcast, we share profound insights that are disruptive yet constructive in nature, offering transformative insight from professionals and thought leaders who are adepts in the topic of personal development and self-improvement that is going to move you from where you are to where you need to be. I'm the host, Omobola Stephen, and this is the Mindshift Conversations where we pivot the changes that you and I need. Now, we emphasize the importance of embracing personal development and self-improvement along the course of our lives, because all of that which we truly desire to have in life also lies within us. And now, when we intentionally and constantly look inwards, I begin to ask the right questions and also focus on developing all that lies within us. We tend to find ourselves along the way, and it's such a joy and a sense of fulfillment when we realize who we truly are and find out our own true identity and all of the possibilities and all of the bounties that life has in store for us. Now, this can only happen when we don't give up on personally developing ourselves and also embracing the changes that life brings our way in the course of finding our true identity in life. Thank you, Sylvia Lerch, for joining me on the show today. Sylvia Lerch is an octogenarian and also the author of Grasp the Nestle. We will be talking about our debut novel, even at age 80, Grasp the Nettle, Australian country life in the 1920s era. Now, it's just generally talking about all the many aspects of your life and all that you have experienced back then. Thank you once again, Sylvia Lerch, for joining me on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm sure we have a lot to share together.
Absolutely, we have a lot to share indeed, especially on your debut book. Now, you wanted to record what you understood to be an accurate picture of life in those days, distinctively different from the popular, distorted depiction that was presented by journalists and historians. What lit this spark, and how did you get to this juncture?
Well, I heard a lot of stories about the 1920 era from my own parents. My mother was born in 1906, which sounds a very long time ago now, and my father in 1902, which is even longer ago. But they were young people in the 1920s, and they had a lot to say about that era. And what they said contradicted the general picture of the gay abandon of that era, and the notion that everything was carefree and not addressing social constraints that were still in existence in the era. So my little story is something that I hope will encourage people to understand better the details of the era and the complexities of social constraints and so forth, and the necessity for more compassion and more understanding of the complexities of life, and to abandon the dictation of one cultural superiority to another. I lived in the Central Pacific era in the 1960s among islanders who are such wonderful people, and they have what I think we all need, a tolerance and an acceptance of people for who they are, and if that could be conveyed to all of us, I think we would all get on a lot better. But they are a minority, of course, absolutely wonderful people. I love them to bits. But my novel concentrates on Australia in the 1920s, which was a time of great change in this nation. The gold rush era had brought lots and lots of people from all over the world coming here, all looking for something for nothing. And it became a melting pot of all sorts of cultures and so forth. And the most important thing to me of that conglomeration of such diverse people was that class structure disappeared. It didn't matter if you were the king's cousin or something or other. It had no standing because you had to survive out here in such a harsh environment and so forth. The distances here are astonishing. People don't understand how big the area is and how little the population is. And it's spread all over this whole area. And the towns are like a string of pearls around the coast of this country because most things traveled by sea. And then my two main characters in my book are a couple thrown together through social constraints rather than through romance. And they are, or he is the mailman. He has got the contract to deliver the Royal Mail by road, not by sea, by road, and not by camel or horse, but by truck. This was an absolutely astonishingly new thing. And the significance of that is lost on today's young people. But anyone with any interest in history can research some details to find out how significant that must have been. No one knew how to repair an engine. They knew how to shoe a horse or how to look after a camel, but they didn't know how to look after an engine. My own grandfather in Tasmania bought the second motor car ever sold in Tasmania in the 1920s, the era of my novel. And there are hilarious stories of him with that car. He used to drive it to church, of course, with the family. And he was very proud of it. He bought it because he loved horses so much and hated to see them neglected and abused, left tied up in the sun all day, or their hooves not treated properly and so forth, and gall sores and all that from neglect. And he thought if people just have motor cars, it won't matter if they neglect their motor car. It's just a car. And my mother said he, having worked with horses all his life, in his 60s, his late 60s, bought this motor car, and he learnt to start it with a crank handle and move from first gear up to second gear and all the way up to third gear. Wow, top gear. But he never learnt to change down the gears. And so if they came to a hill, and there's lots of hills in Tasmania, instead of changing down the gears, he would let go the steering wheel, raise his arms high in the air, and urge the horses on. Get up! Because he was still so totally connected to horses. And it brings history alive when you hear stories like that. And
Absolutely. It does. It does bring a history alive, really, because even your book also shows the powerful role of the church now in the 1920s. Now,
yes,
it went along to say the church was a meeting place, not just for religious ceremonies, but for the conducting of one's life. I wanted to ask you what led you to arrive at this conclusion. What was your experience like? Did you have any experience in this regard?
oh, absolutely. There was no social security. There was no dole, if you like. There was no backup from the government. Um, all those things related to the church. Charity came from the church. The church was very dominant in this country, and I'm talking about Christian church. And if anybody needed help, it was the church to which they turned. And the church dominated all sorts of social activities, social acceptance related to the church. Um, if you were not accepted by the church congregation, well, you were really, really outcast. And so you needed to be um, to, how can I talk about it? Um, to make sure that whatever you did conformed to the demands of the church congregation. The two primary characters in my story, and the story is extremely brief so that the reader doesn't get tired of it. It's intentionally very intense and so forth, no flowery descriptions of unnecessary things. It is the diary entries of two people writing their own personal diaries, which they never expected anybody else to read, really. And but they both conform to the constraints of society, which was based on the church, in order to progress, in order to get anywhere. They have to conform to the demands of the church. They get
But
married.
Sylvia, when compared to the modern time now, what do you see as the difference now, conforming to the dictates of the church or to the dictates of the society? I think, does it really come to play at such a time that we are in right now? Or what's your own take on that?
Could you please say that again?
Yes, you were trying to tell my audience about uh, the trying to conform. You're talking
Yeah.
about the actors in the book trying to conform to the dictates of the church and also to the dictates of the society. Now I'm asking that when compared to the modern age right now, do you still see that situation at play at this time where we have people who conform to the dictates of the church and to the dictates of the society? Do you think both comes at play, or what do you think? What are the differences that you have observed in this modern age?
Well, the government has taken over a large part of the role that used to belong to the church, the charity part of it. People can get financial assistance from the government without having to belong to a church or conform to a church and so forth. I think it's been a very radical change. Who am I to judge whether it's for better or worse? But it's very easily recognized as a big change. Take the unmarried mother's pension, for instance. In this country, our political leader, Gough Whitlam, introduced, he's not the ultimate leader, the leader is the Governor General, but he was the political leader, and he introduced the unmarried mother's pension. That meant that a woman who found herself to be pregnant because there was no reliable contraceptive no longer had to marry a man in order to be what men of the day called to be made an honest woman. She could claim a pension from the government or the taxpayer and support herself on that. Well, that was a massive change, and it didn't turn out to be what was intended, I don't think. It turned out to be a situation where the men just said, oh, well, I'm not going to bother getting married. I'm going to let the woman I live with just claim a pension as well as sharing my life and so forth. It's a political complexity that began with good intentions, I think, but the reality is we are all subject to human frailty, and human frailty has meant that the values have been distorted. But for the people in my novel, they lived in a different era, and I think it's important that people today read about the 1920s and recognize that things have changed, that in that era, life must have been extremely hard. It wasn't all the fun and frivolity that is so easily projected about that era, the frivolity of dancing the Charleston and so forth, and being so happy and gay after winning the First World War. It was a difficult era, and most of that was because there was no reliable contraceptive. And the institution of marriage was set up for the protection of the natural product of marriage. What is that? It's children, of course. It's children. Marriage was set up for the protection of the children because children need both parents and the parents need each other. And that is something that seems to have been diminished in value or lost over the horizon. I don't know. Who am I? I'm the wrong generation to understand young
Absolutely.
people's
Even at
attitudes.
that, yes, even at that, women also were confronted by and battled against gender inequality, the dictates of unjust social demands, prejudice, and perceived powerlessness. Now, also, don't you think this comes to play at this time? Because what happened in those times, I think is still playing out till today. So, the main question is, how can we begin to find the way out?
Oh, that's a big question. Yes, it's a very big question. I think if we get back to the basic instruction from the man himself, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yeah, that is such a simple command and so hard to carry out. But it is the fundamental solution to everything that's wrong today, if you ask me. It's such a simple command and yet so hard to carry out. And I hope that people reading my very insignificant novel can be tempted to find out for themselves more about the message from the man himself, Jesus of Nazareth. Yeah, find out for yourself. What did he say? What did he mean? Elsie, my character, the only book she has to read is a copy of the Holy Bible. She's left alone in the house for long periods of time because her husband works away from home. And she picks up the Holy Bible and starts reading it. But she makes some unconventional um, very unconventional assessments of what the words really mean, because she has no minister to help her interpret it. But her assessments are worth listening to and worth considering. And I hope that other people can be encouraged to do the same. Find out for yourself, what was this message? Who was this bloke? How did he do that? And why did so many people follow him? And why do we all calculate today's date from the day he was born? I don't think anyone will ever calculate today's date from the day I was born. My life is not significant enough, but his must have been. So why was that? There must have been enormous significance in it. And I hope people are encouraged to find that out, at least attempt to find that out. Avoid the dogma of you must eat fish on Fridays or something like that. That's not what the man himself said. What did he say? Well, it's there in front of you. If you read a copy of the Holy Bible, it's there in front of you for each of us to read and absorb and obsess and not obsess, to access each of us. And I hope people are encouraged to do that. My story is a novel, and I hope it entertains people in relation to it being a story significant about social cohesion and social acceptance and diversity of gender and so forth. And the name Grasp the Nettle is an old saying meaning take hold of your challenges in life. Make the best of your opportunities. Yeah, and I hope people can gain something from reading it.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Invariably, all of your inputs is simply directing us to go get your book and learn all that's very important and applicable to us and also in the society, perhaps the nestle. I'm sure that we're going to do that. But really, how did you see people cope with life's challenges during those times? Compared to this time, we have technology at play now. Don't you think life is much more simpler and much more flexible compared to the era of 1920s?
No, I don't. No, I think it's too easy to judge today's era as better when, in fact, in many ways, it can't possibly be. I think people today are too disconnected from the reality of where their food comes from, for instance, and how dependent people are on the goodwill of each other. There's a health issue, if you like. In the 1920s, diseases didn't spread so fast. Today, if you catch an aircraft to somewhere, you pick up some flu or some COVID or something. I think the health situation is worse than it used to be. Then there's the conflict of jabbing or no jabbing. There are so many things I think that are worse than they used to be. I think the 1920s was a very good era in many ways because things had changed after the First World War. Women were able to wear short length dresses, for instance, because the women had to do the work the men had done when the men went away to the war. In this country, for instance, little old Australia, this tiny population, almost all the men went away to war to defend the empire. They went away for a big adventure. They couldn't take a gap year and go traveling for a year. They couldn't fly to Athens and see all the history there or something. The war was a chance for a lot of the young men to take a holiday, if you like, to go on an adventure. There's that wonderful song, we joined the Navy to see the world. We went to sea, and what did we see? We saw the ocean. We saw the sea. Yeah. Anyway, men joined the armed forces to leave this country and go on an adventure. But most of them didn't come back. And they certainly were away when things had to be done here to plant the crops, to look after the animals, to carry on with the agriculture, which is so important. How can we live without producing the grain for the bread we eat, the stock for the meat we eat? How can we survive without that? We can't survive on bush tucker. There isn't enough of it to support all of us. So agriculture is extremely important. And it's difficult in this country because the country's climate is so harsh, and so much of this country is regarded as desert by other nations. So it was the women who had to learn to follow the plough. Follow the plough in full-length skirts? How could you do that? You had to cut your skirt short to follow a plough, horse-drawn, and you had to be extremely strong to do a job like that. You just had to get out there and do the fencing, to milk the cow, to look after the pigs and the chickens and stuff, to shear the sheep, to manage the stock, to get on a horse and ride astride a horse instead of side saddle in order to manage the stock and so forth. There were enormous changes because of the First World War. And after that, so many families had lost their men that the women gained a different status, but the women still had the instincts of humankind, but there was still no reliable contraceptive, which is the most basic thing. Yep. So, as I said before, marriage was an institution set up for the protection of the natural product of marriage, children. Children need particular attention. They need both parents, and the parents need each other. So it was a kind of a contradiction. These women had been freed from a lot of the constraints that they had been subject to for generations, absolutely generations. But they were still confronted with the problem of natural life. And there was no social security. If you needed help, you had to turn to the church. And if you were an unmarried woman pregnant, well, the church frowned on you. You were a sinner. You had sort of no excuse. The men were never blamed for this. Nobody ever said, oh, I'll marry this man and make an honest man out of him. But men frequently said, oh, if she's pregnant, I'll marry her and make an honest woman out of her. These are the kind of degrading categories that women were subjected to. But my book tries to show diversity of social standards, of social acceptability, of people trying to make the best of their situation and doing their best, but faced with hard cards that fate has dealt them. And it's deliberately brief to make it more intense. And of course, the formatting is intended to make it easy for people to read. The two diaries are written in different font, and it's easy for the reader to recognize which diary they're reading. And that came to me from that wonderful book. Do you know that absolutely wonderful book with the magnificent title, The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society? Do you know that book?
Yes. Now, do you see? Yes. Do you see Australian women making changes in this modern age?
I'm sorry, please say that again. You're
Yes. Do you
breaking up a
see
bit.
now? Do you see Australian women? Do you see them making changes in this modern age? Are there been
Oh,
transformation?
modern women are completely different. And I think that's largely because they have a reliable contraceptive. They they make choices that were not available before. They are career oriented, but they are disconnected from the reality of where their food comes from, for instance. And I know so many women now who have taken up the career path and all that successful. I know a successful woman, she's a PhD in law and so forth, successful career, but she's an absolute mess because she realizes now that she has missed the chance of motherhood. She's never going to be a mother. She's chosen not to be a mother. So there's this massive, massive gap in her life. And she has failed to achieve the most wonderful thing in life for a woman, motherhood. Motherhood. It's the most wonderful thing a mother can ever achieve, a woman can ever achieve. And it's a gift from God. And women today are choosing not to do that. And as my father used to say 10 times a day, it's the wrong people breeding. He was always saying that because he used to say the women who are breeding today are not the good mothers. They're not the ones who will recognize this gift from God of motherhood and the huge value that that is to enrich the life of a woman. And it must be also the life of a man, although I really, truly can't understand how being a father can be anything like being a mother. I just don't get that unless it's a, what do you call that, a hereditary thing of passing things on, of eldest son and heir or something or other. That can be of value to a man, but I, I just don't comprehend how a man can understand the true value of parenthood the way a mother can. But I'm probably wrong in that. I know I'm wrong in lots of things, and but I still value very, very, very highly. I'm so grateful to have been the mother of 4 beautiful children. I give thanks every day for the fact that my children were healthy, hale and hearty, beautiful children. And motherhood is just such an enrichment. And of course, breastfeeding is the next component that just makes that huge connection to your child. And words can't describe the value of it all to both people, the mother and the child. And it's such a rich gift available to almost every woman. And yet so many of them today are choosing not to do that. They're choosing not to do that. And I think it's a huge mistake. But I mean, who am I to judge?
Right, thank you so much, Sylvia Lerch, for sharing that insight with the audience. Do you have any exciting news? You have a project you think the audience is going to benefit from? Of course, you can share them. If you have any, we can have also your social media handles and your website to learn more about you and all there is about Sylvia Lerch. Go ahead and share.
Well, I'm very old-fashioned and stubbornly old-fashioned. I don't have a website. I don't have a Facebook page. I don't have an email address. I have a postal address, Post
All right.
Office Box 89 in Exmouth, Western Australia, 6707. I'm happy to get snail mail from people interested. I, I, I don't have a smartphone. I've never used an automatic teller machine. I, I, I don't belong in this electronic era, but I'm very, very happy to talk to you. And thank you for the chance to reach out to your followers. I'm sure that there must be many, many, many of them. And
Sylvia, was this intentional? You don't want to connect with technology at all. Is this something that is intentional? And also,
absolutely.
we're talking about your book. So how can we get the book?
The
Is
book
it
is available
online?
from, yes, from Amazon or from the publisher, Austin Macaulay in London. It's certainly easily available as a hard copy or an ebook or an audio copy, easily available. And I hope people enjoy it. It's a very modest publication, but I think it's an enjoyable read because it's so, what's the correct word? It's condensed down to an intensity. So it doesn't take long to read, but it's packed full of information and history, genuine history. And I hope it leads to people researching more about subjects in it. And I am stubbornly, I'm in my 81st year, and I don't want to connect with modern electronics and technology and stuff. I have 6 great grandchildren now. How did that happen? But I leave the technology to them. And I do thank you very much for having me on your program. It really means something to me. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's been a great pleasure and such a delight and honor to have you, Sylvia Lerch. You are an octogenarian, also the author of your debut novel, Graphs the Nassau. Such a timely book for us, not just women, I think for the society in general, the importance of us embracing the challenges of life, making a lemonade out of what life gives us as a lemon. Uh, I think it's also important for us to begin to have a mind shift. When we come across your book and read into the pages of how we can begin to overcome life's challenges when we are ready to do so. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and also some of the important excerpts in your book. We wish you best of luck in this book project, Sylvia, from the bottom of my heart. And on behalf of the audience of Library by Omobola Stephen, where we share disruptive yet constructive mind shift conversations on topics that ranges from personal development and self-improvement. Now, if you'd like to catch up with any missed episodes of the show, you can do so on any podcast distribution platforms or any podcast cross promotion platforms. And do have a great time listening to these mindship conversations that is going to transform your life. and move you from where you are to where you need to be when you begin to intentionally take into practice the tools and strategies that are provided by the experts and professionals who come to share their thoughts on the show. I need you always to stay safe. I talk to you soon. Thank you once again, Sylvia Lerch. It was such an honor and a pleasure to have you share your insight to the topic of discussion.
Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate the opportunity you've given me, and I really value your opinion. Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe and leave us a review.